Hello, hello. Is this the right entry point for the panel?
Well, hello and a very good morning to you with a warm welcome to day 2 of the National Manufacturing Summit. My name is Daisy McAndrew and I'm delighted to be your host for today. Now, before we kick off properly, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please be aware that the conference is being recorded so it can be viewed at a later date on the NTC's YouTube and Vimeo channels. We will share the link to the recording after the event. Now, during this session, you'll be in listening mode only with videos and mics turned off, but you will be able to submit your questions to your panelists using the Q&A function, and that is located at the bottom of your screen. And please do send as many questions as you want. I will be keeping an eye on your comments and your questions, your thoughts and your anecdotes, and I do want to put as many of them as possible to our fantastic speakers and panelists today. Also, if you see a question that's been submitted by somebody else that you particularly like and you want to hear the answer to, you can click the little thumbs up icon, and again that'll send me a message that that question is particularly popular, and I'll endeavour to make sure I get an answer to it. Also, please note that you will need to keep referring to your interactive event guide in order to navigate your way through today's event. We're staying on this platform here, the main stage, until 11 o'clock. After 11, you'll need to refer back to the guide to click on the various sessions taking place throughout the day to make sure you get to the sessions you want to see. At various intervals during the day, we'll have the opportunity to meet the experts, be they from aerospace, defence, infrastructure, low carbon, power and energy, SME and skills and training and skills. Lots of experts, lots of sessions. If you'd like to talk to one of our MTC specialists in those areas, do click on the applicable link in the interactive event guide. And lastly, if you're having any problems at all, if you're having any technological problems, gremlins in your system, do drop an email to our events team and they'll be able to help you. That email address is events@the-mtc.org and they'll be happy to help you out. Before we get started on day 2, I'd like to spend a few minutes reflecting on what's been an incredible journey so far.
Just let's start and let's welcome you to Williams Racing.
7 wins for Frank Williams' team, 6 of them here for Alan Jones. Nigel Mansell wins the 1992 British Grand Prix in terrific style. And David Hill exits the chicane and wins the Japanese Grand Prix. And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
around racing cars, around racing drivers. It's just a marvellous place to be.
For motorsport, we talk about innovation, but a lot of the innovation we develop and we build on has been taken from other industry. We're simply the vehicle that can help accelerate the development of it. That's why I think it's really important that this whole summit is happening, that it can help bring us all together and start to share more ideas and have a joined up voice to look at how do we move forwards as a technology sector rather than just a Formula One team in a motorsport.
The first step for all of the things that you want to do is to understand with fact and data exactly where you currently are. It's given you real-time data and real information to make real business decisions. Because only by understanding that can we then make the right decisions and provide that balance between agile manufacturing and sustainability.
A business just doesn't become agile by accident. It has to be deliberate, it has to be engineered in. We take that philosophy from what we do on the race car and how we develop that. Are we adding performance? Are we making it more reliable? Or both, ideally. And we apply that to every part of the business. To finish first you must finish. So a fast car is one thing, but it also needs to get to the end of the race and be reliable. And you have to have this ambition to keep improving the speed of your business.
Under 40 years worth of heritage, that's 40 times that we've tried to go up and down the mountain. The location may have changed, but the challenge is always the same.
Roger, and you are clear for display. The wind at the moment 29011. Crosswind 7 from the right.
Boom. And there you have it. Basically, hello, ladies and gentlemen, that is how you take a 17-year career and you just compress it into a 1-minute pop video. I think that is the way forward in life, is it not? But this is really what I love to do. £35 million worth of hardware flying off through the valleys of the Lake District. You drop round the corner heading into Wales and you're down in a glacial valley bottom. You look up onto the hills in front of you and you see somebody walking and you know they are enjoying the peace and quiet of the countryside. And you think, aha, they cannot hear or see me yet, but oh, I can see you. Your hands go towards your throttles. You get an overwhelming urge to suddenly ram them into full reheat. The flames come pouring out the back of the jet as you accelerate to just under 600 miles an hour. And at that critical stage of flying, one wrong move, it will all go horribly wrong. So what do? You go back to your basics. You remember what's truly important in life. You turn the jet on its side, and as you go past, you give a very casual and jaunty wave of your hand out the top of the canopy, as I did on this occasion, only to be caught on camera. It's about going the extra mile. It's because actually together everyone achieves more, and it works every single time. Unselfish behaviour to achieve a goal.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce Sandy and to coin these. Now I'm championing these words massively. So Sandy, you have control.
I have control. Thanks very much, Al. The attributes that are helping and will help companies emerge stronger from the pandemic: adaptability, resilience, and the ability to predict.
We are developing electrical solutions for a range of applications. You can see top left there, this is the City Airbus. That's an eVTOL concept which runs with some of our motors in it. That flew untethered at the back end of 2019. The one on the top right there, very, very exciting aeroplane. That's our Axel program, in which we hope to seize the world record for electrically powered aviation, hopefully very, very soon as we get the aircraft into the skies. Bottom left there is a much bigger engine. That's a hybrid electric solution. That's a gas turbine of the size which you would find in a C-130 Hercules, driving a 2.5 megawatt generator. And again, that will be a hybrid electric solution which allows you to combine electrification with the power of a gas turbine as well, and optimize your power management throughout the flight envelope. The bottom right there is another demonstrator, hybrid electric solution, where you've got one gas turbine which drives a generator in combination with batteries, and you can drive those 4 propellers electrically. So it allows you to demonstrate the combination of both electric and gas turbine power. So our strategy here is fundamentally to look at the range of applications and make sure we've got the technologies on the shelf which will allow us to adapt to how the market develops in particular areas as the world understands what the optimum power sources will be.
As you can see, there is not much I don't know about endurance and resilience. Here are some of the lessons I've learned, and some of them will apply to businesses like yours. First of all, even when my expeditions have been alone, I was still surrounded by a great team of organizers. Everything we do is planned well in advance, sometimes 7 years in advance. We always plan for the worst case, and we make sure we have the right resources for the journey ahead of us, whatever should go wrong. We study those who have failed to break the records before us. We study everybody who has failed to do it before us and why they failed. Otherwise, we fail. Like 1 in 5 startups don't make it past their first year. For example, this camp is called Oxygen, and without oxygen, we will die. So like a business needs funding and it needs a supply chain, we need to plan ahead. In the United Kingdom, we have always shared a spirit of adventure. We have a history of being pioneers, innovators, and scientists. And through my life, I have lived these values about what I can achieve and what is the next mountain that I can climb.
Choosing carefully the right team to execute that plan is absolutely critical, whether you are on the mountainside, whether you are looking at your supply chains, or whether you're looking at your financial sort of planning. Also critical in business is the need, particularly in these heightened circumstances in a post-Brexit, post-COVID, and now post-budget world, planning to make sure that you have the right resources around you, making sure you've got the right mix of funding, the right type of funding for different needs within your business, whether that be spending money to invest in machinery to be more efficient, new technology to become more agile, which I'll reference back in a moment, and the importance of that when we have unusual situations occur like a pandemic, but equally making sure that you are planned really carefully. Just like in the mountains, Saran said about planning up to 7 years in advance, having an itinerary, knowing the importance of where you expect to be day after day, making sure you've got those bad weather days built in, making sure that you understand what you're seeing now, is that what you expected? And if not, that's a warning sign to say something's going wrong, something's not on track. Either I'm not walking or climbing fast enough, or the weather's holding us up, or actually, am I going too quickly and I'm putting myself at risk? at risk in business of either overtrading, or on the mountains at risk of suffering from mountain sickness through going too high too quickly.
And if we actually want to ensure that our supply chains are resilient, there's three things that we need to consider, because actually supply chain resilience is about the capability of a firm to be alert to adapt to and quickly respond to changes brought about by a supply chain disruption. And this means that your organisations need to be ready pre-disruption with some proactive strategies. They need to be responsive during the disruption, where there's a series of strategies that we could describe as both being proactive and reactive. And in the post-disruption phase, when your organisations are facing recovery and growth, there are some reactive strategies that we may need to consider.
Thank you to the organisers of the National Manufacturing Summit. Northern Ireland has a long and proud manufacturing tradition with great historic achievements in linen production, ocean liners and aircraft. It is important that we work together to address the constantly evolving challenges and also to help position the sector to innovate, upskill and improve efficiency to capitalise on emerging global trends around net zero and Industry 4.0 adoption.
I do have optimism for the future. In Wales, a huge amount of good work has been undertaken in recent years that positions us, I think, very well for the future. And Wales has a strong infrastructure, industrial and research base that can provide a platform for accelerating significant new high-tech and alternative energy projects through the 2020s and beyond. Our manufacturing community can capitalise on this.
I'd like to begin, if I may, by thanking you all for everything that you have done over the past year to keep the country going through the pandemic. It's been the most dreadful times, but you, the manufacturing sector, have displayed resilience, agility and commitment in helping the country battle the virus. From making the PPE needed to protect our frontline workers, to producing the vaccines that will eventually let us safely see our loved ones again, I have to say that the manufacturing sector has been at the heart of the country's efforts.
As you now aim for the peak and look to the future, I wish you well in reaching higher heights for manufacturing.
Well, what a journey it's been, hasn't it? I thoroughly enjoyed yesterday's events and sessions and speakers and panels, and I know that today will be just as good. Lots of energy, lots of fascinating conversations, political updates as we had yesterday from all around the UK, and some pretty inspirational speakers. So let's look a little bit at today's great lineup of speakers. We can promise you panel discussions on the ventilator challenge and net zero. We'll have keynotes, including one from a former Royal Air Force pilot and another from a Paralympian. It really is going to be a great agenda today. So let's get started. I'm delighted to welcome the Minister for Science, Research and Innovation, Amanda Soloway.
I wanted to begin by saying how delighted I am to have the opportunity to be here today, and I'd like to thank the MTC for inviting me to speak on the importance of innovation. We have seen during the pandemic how vital innovation is in vaccines and ventilators, and the many ways that individuals and businesses have had to adapt. Innovation was critical to the UK's recovery from the pandemic and the UK's long-term growth and productivity. The UK is a leading innovator globally. We have many of the world's most innovative firms across many sectors, and vibrant startup ecosystem, and we're ranked 4th in the Global Innovation Index. Whilst this is a positive basis from which to build, we need to do more. We have a vision of the UK as the world's most innovative nation. There's more that we can do to unlock innovation throughout all parts of the UK. In the R&D roadmap, we set out our priorities for boosting innovation in the UK economy to make it a world-leading place to develop innovations and bring them to market. Building on the roadmap, we're taking forward an ambitious programme of work spanning the innovation landscape to identify how we can enhance innovation. Critical to this work is the Innovation Expert Group, launched in September 2020 and chaired by Hayatum Salem of the Royal Academy of Engineering. The group has already been integral on providing detailed advice on how we should support UK innovation, and we will continue to draw on their expertise. In the coming months, we will set out a range of initiatives and drive forward our ambitions for innovation. As announced in Building Back Better, our plan for growth, alongside the budget, we will publish an innovation strategy led by my department to inspire, facilitate and unleash innovation across the United Kingdom. My department is working across government to develop this strategy, which will be published this summer. We're also engaged with the innovation community to ensure that the strategy is based in evidence and that the policy developed will generate the impact we want. As part of this strategy, we will consider the strengths and weaknesses of the UK's innovation ecosystem as a whole, including catapult centres as a critical part of this ecosystem. Catapult centres such as the MTC play an incredibly important role in the R&D ecosystem as they act as the bridge between the UK's research base and industry, supporting innovators and sectors. Last year, the Prime Minister announced we would examine how the catapults could strengthen R&D capability in local areas and improve productivity and prosperity across the UK. The review will soon be published. In conducting the review, I have been pleased to hear from stakeholders from the vital support catapults are providing to develop commercial products in high potential sectors and technologies. It is vital that we make the most of these unique assets. The review not only looks at the impact of catapults to date, but how we can support the catapult network to continue to flourish and support these sectors, including through enhancing their local economies and skills development. As we look ahead, it is institutions like the MTC that we can rely on to provide the leadership required to bring together the different voices of key sectors, to stimulate the collaboration required to unleash innovation and to build back better from the pandemic. And that is exactly what this summit aims to do. Research and innovation has been and will continue to be critical to the economy and social recovery from the impacts of COVID-19, enabling us to build back better for a greener, healthier and more resilient UK.
Okay, well, many thanks to the Minister. Very insightful and lots of promises of value to this industry. Okay, well, we're going to move into our first set of parallel sessions of the day. Now, there are 3 parallel sessions taking place, so you'll need to make sure you have your interactive event guide to hand. All of the links are featured within the guide, so just click on the session that you want to attend and hopefully that'll take you straight there. Now, if you want to hear how F1 and UK Motorsport are leading the race to accelerate electric vehicles, you're in the right place. Stay right where you are here on the main stage. If, however, you would like to celebrate 250 years since the first factory in the UK and the evolution of the factory, then you should move into session number 12. If you're passionate about skills, and I think yesterday's event certainly told us that lots of you are, so if skills is your thing, head over to session 13 for a panel discussion on skills for the future. As I said, to access sessions 12 and 13, you need to have a look on your interactive guide, and there you'll find all the relevant links. So if you're staying with us, we are going to head straight into our session on F1 Auto Low Carbon. And I'm delighted to welcome Al Peasland, Head of Technical and Innovation Partnerships at Williams Racing, who's going to be moderating this session. Al, welcome and over to you.
Hi Daisy, thank you very much. And yeah, what a great start to the day 2 of the summit. We've made it. We very fortunate to have been involved in the very first Camp 1 session of Emotion, and so to see us finally reach the summit has been a fantastic journey. And so with that, I'd like to start really by just thanking everyone at the MTC for building this great event at incredibly short notice. They've done an amazing job, and really pleased that we've been able to join in and be a part of it. So as Daisy mentioned, I'm Head of Technical and Innovation Partnerships at Williams Racing, the Formula One team. However, today my role is here merely one of host. So I'll do the best job I can to elicit some of the best answers from what is a fantastic lineup of guests, and I'm really grateful for them joining us today. The plan for the session will be that I'm going to introduce each guest in turn. They'll give you a bit about their background, and then we'll bring everyone together to join in what will hopefully be a very informative and I'm expecting quite a fun conversation around low carbon and sustainability, both in motorsport but also automotive. And so before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. Let's make this as interactive as possible. For those that have joined this session, thank you very much. Please use the Q&A section to post any questions. I have it on another screen here, so if you see me looking away, I'm checking for questions that I can pose to our panel. And yeah, let's get started. So we mentioned the theme of the event is around low carbon, specifically from a motorsport and automotive world. Not only what are we doing in these industries to help drive a more sustainable future, but also what are we doing inside the organizations to be more sustainable and to develop innovation in a sustainable way. And so we've got a great lineup of guests that I think span those industries really nicely and hopefully complement each other pretty well. And so without any favoritism, first up, I'd like to introduce our Operations Director at Williams Racing, James Colgate. So James, thanks for joining. A quick intro before you get started, I guess. You've been with Williams since 2011. I'm guessing started when you were around 10 years of age then, because still looking pretty good considering how busy you are. But before that, you've been in the consultancy world and a lot of experience around strategy, which I think plays into this theme really well. And so if I can just ask you to give the audience a bit of an intro on yourself and the Williams team and what your role is, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks Al, and welcome everybody. Great to be part of this. Yeah, very much not quite the same as doing it in person, but I'm joining you from our site in Oxfordshire. So yeah, as Al said, I'm the operations director here at Williams. So in summary, my role is to take a design from engineering and deliver them a car to the circuit. I also operate all of the test facilities that enable the engineering team to decide how to make a car and also run the overall site. So if we're talking about sustainability and carbon, I'm probably the main generator of most of it. So it probably makes a lot of sense that I'm the person that also tries to reduce it. As Al said, I've been at Williams for the last 10 years, a number of different roles across that time. But I'm an engineer, a manufacturing engineer by background, but had a little detour through the city prior to coming to Williams, working as a consultant, typically with technology-based businesses. So yeah, for us, those of you who don't know, we've been racing in Formula One for the last 42 years now, and as a business, we exist to go racing. That was the philosophy set up by the Williams family, and has been continued throughout the business. Team of around 700 people based here in Oxfordshire, and although at the moment quite a lot of those working from home, as you might imagine, but fundamentally we're a vertically integrated manufacturing business that designs and makes and uses our own product. And for that reason, it's quite an interesting world. And sustainability has actually been a core part of Williams for the last 10 years that I've been there. And not just in the traditional sense of low carbon, but also in terms of education, access to opportunities and skills, and also road safety, so we're very close to Frank's heart. So for the last 10 years or so, we've been doing carbon disclosures and also doing small tactical projects wherever we can across the business to reduce our impact on the environment. And through those carbon disclosures, it's quite interesting. Everybody always looks at the racing car going round in circles of the track, and maybe as far as the aviation sending everybody there. But actually, the bulk of that carbon emission is generated through what we do here and how we actually design, build the car. So actually, that's probably more my focus is things away from the track in terms of how we reduce our overall environmental negative impact and look at how we move the technology to be more positive for the wider world. Thank you, Al.
James, thanks for that, and again, thanks for joining today. I know we're a week away from first race, so I know things are pretty busy for you at the moment in the factory. So yeah, thanks for your time today. So our next guest, and leading on nicely from Formula One, is Mark Preston, who's team principal at a Formula E team, DST Cheetah. Mark, welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate the time again. Probably at an incredibly busy time for you and the team. I know there's a short video that we were going to play to kind of welcome you to the panel. So if I can ask our admin to play the movie, and then we'll hear a little bit from you. So thanks, Mark, and again, thanks for joining us. If I can ask to turn on your microphone, that would be great. And yeah, if you're able to give us just give us a little background about yourself and Formula E and DST Cheetah, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Al. Good morning to everybody. Yeah, I'm Mark Preston. I'm the team principal at DST Cheetah Formula E team. I actually started over in the UK in F1 a number of years ago, and we've got quite a lot of relationships, I think, with F1 that we're going to talk about in the next part of the session. So yeah, I run the team. We're backed by DS, which is a French car brand, part of the Stellantis group. I started in Formula E at the beginning. I was interested in how electric vehicles would become part of the world. I think I started looking at this whole thing back as 2008, when I helped one of the electric motor companies spin out of Oxford University. So it's funny, been doing it for quite a while. We're the current teams and drivers champions. We've won both titles for the last 2 years. We've just been in Saudi Arabia last week, where we had 2 night races, which was great. We didn't have the best races, but we certainly caused a bit of excitement on the TV in the first races. Where we also won the Drivers' Championship in season 4, so we've had 3 drivers' titles. I was one of the founding team principals, so I've been involved in Formula E since the very beginning. It was been an exciting ride. I think again we'll find out more about how Williams has actually helped the whole thing start off. It's very much a startup. When we did start doing Formula E all those years ago, we're up to season 7 now. People thought we're pretty crazy, and we've survived this long. We're basically trying to help the adoption of electric vehicles, more specifically in cities, because cities can probably take the best advantage. And given that something like 60% of the world will be living in mega cities in the next 10 to 20 years, already quite a large proportion. So a lot of the focus, obviously, because of the COVID situation, has really started to highlight more about clean air, and that's something that I'm quite passionate about, clean air in cities around the world. hopefully we're going to be heading off to Rome in a couple of weeks' time, but we'll be following what happens with the various governments around the world. But yeah, hopefully you can all see us racing again in the very near future as we begin as a world championship now, actually, as a Formula E. So I'll hand it back to you, Al.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. And yeah, thanks for joining us again today. As I say, busy time for everyone on the panel today. So thank you. And yes, very intrigued to hear about that history and the links back to Williams. And I think that also leads us on nicely to our next guest, who is Dr. Christiana Pace, who's spent a lot of career working with the FIA and around motorsport. And yeah, just really pleased to have you with us today, as you're our industry expert, our industrial advisor today. So Christiana, thanks for joining. And if I can hand over to you for a brief intro, that would be great.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Christiana Pace. I've been in motorsport for 21 years. I'm the director of innovation consulting. That is a purpose-driven company that is specialized in building sustainability strategy and environmental management system and legacy project for the motorsport industry mainly. My background is in engineering. I'm a motorsport engineer, and I actually started my career in GT first as a strategy and data engineer, and then I moved into F1 with the FIA, as you mentioned, Al. But my first 10 years with the FIA were actually based on building safety and the legacy of safety with motorsport. And I was with the F1 technical department to trying to make Formula One more safe. And then after move on a bit to trying to actually deploy the safety system throughout all the motorsport. And it kind of nicely move on, kind of in 2012, I joined Williams Advanced Engineering with the idea of trying to bring motorsport into other industry. And I kind of been thrown into this building the battery for the Formula E and making motorsport low carbon and more accessible. So it's kind of like I left Williams 5 years ago, trying to fund my own company, and passing by Coventry University with a PhD in low carbon transition. And so my aims at the moment is trying to build a more sustainable motorsport with the contribution of all stakeholders. As you mentioned, Al, I kind of sit in many committees to try to do that, one of which is the FIA Environmental and Sustainability Commission. And the other is just been announced a few weeks ago, is the e-scooter Sustainability Commission that is trying to actually drive sustainability in the micromobility industry as well. So that's two big challenges, but I do love challenges.
Thanks, Christiana. And yeah, great. Thanks for the introduction. And we're really pleased to have you with us today. And that leads us on nicely to last but not least, I guess, Paul Andrews, who's Head of Government Affairs for Arrival, which is a fascinating organisation, quite a disruptive business in the automotive world, really accelerating development of electric vehicles. But without stealing any thunder, I think we also have a quick movie to introduce Paul. So hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us. Another great intro movie.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, Mark, I was also enjoying your intro movie. We've got some sort of intro movie competition going on here. So yeah, I think we're really lucky. We've got some great content to share with you today and some really interesting insights. So thanks for the invitation, Al. And yeah, good morning, everyone. So yeah, Paul Andrews, Head of Government Affairs, working in the strategy function of Arrival. So it's a really exciting company that I can share some information around today. And specifically within strategy, I'm looking at how we kind of take the business global. And I kind of talk to that a bit more later on, but the kind of the premise of Arrival is to take electric vehicles globally through micro factories, which in itself, as you mentioned, is quite disruptive, but that decentralized manufacturing process is going to really contribute towards sustainability goals globally. So yeah, really excited to be part of this panel, and hand it back to you, Al, for now.
Great, thanks, Paul. And with that, if I can welcome all of our panelists to turn on their cameras and microphones, and we'll all join together in a bit of a gallery view. Wonderful. So I wanted to really start by, and I mentioned in the opener that there's kind of two themes to this. One is the great technology development that can drive, you know, sustainable solutions for everyone. But I wanted to focus inwards to begin with and look at what are we doing within our own organizations and your own organizations that are helping you guys to operate in sustainable ways, and whether that's things that you've been doing in the past, currently, or even plans for the future, as much as you are able to share. And so to kind of go back to the start, I thought maybe, James, if you can give us some kind of overview of within the operation, within the manufacturing business that is Williams Racing, what's the drive and the focus on sustainability now, and what are the kind of things that you're driving in the business towards that?
I think, yeah, Al, it's a really interesting topic, and you know, it's for us, it's really about looking at the whole process, from everything we do on the site, all of the processes, and looking where are the opportunities to make long-term difference as well. And for us, you know, just going and offsetting somewhere, not really the idea for us. It's about actually genuinely stopping and reducing the impact we have. And you know, we look across our business. We've got data centers that are data hungry and generate heat. We've got a rather large wind tunnel that's particularly power hungry, and but actually also could be, what else could we use its power for? We slow it down. And also the more mundane things. You know, we've got to keep the lights on. We've got to keep everybody warm or cool in the summer or the winter. And how we actually start looking at that, and also it's about, for me, making a long-term strategy. There's not a series of short tactical projects just to make to sort of hit a PR headline, which historically has been often organisations have been criticised for doing. But actually look at the long-term strategy for how we incrementally bring the site into the most carbon friendly and sort of resource light point of view. And also it's actually about business efficiency. How can we be most efficient with our resources? You know, we have a cost cap introduced in Formula One, and that drives us as a business to be efficient. And actually that efficiency theme has to go across everything. And because the more we can be efficient, the more car development we can generate and put on the car. So it's everything. And one thing I should probably say is, since we started a bigger focus on this, the amount of staff engagement and feedback and ideas I get in my inbox on a weekly basis is actually quite impressive. Some slightly more practical than others. You know, I'm probably not going to have a swap out the tractor for some sheep, if I'm honest, mostly because they can't, unless anybody can find me some sheep that mow in straight lines. That's allowed, but it's not going to ruin the look of my site. But yeah, I think that you know, we shouldn't forget the staff engagement side of it as well. And actually, when you're recruiting people do look at the business and what are your commitments from there. You know, we use compostable vegware across the canteen, etc. As an example. That's actually been quite well received by staff. We compost things off waste on site, and then there's the bigger elements of actually how can we use reduce our energy footprint. Should we use solar? Should we use wind? And also, I'm quite interested in what are the new and emerging technologies out there. So, you know, can we try things? Can we work in F1? We're good as a test bed for things. Typically, everybody thinks about the car, but actually on our site as well. So, you know, I've got various proposals that we're evaluating, from wind turbines to park fences, and we're actually on the edge of a railway line, so there's quite a lot of air passing quite quickly. Can we generate electricity? Can we store electricity as well? You know, obviously the work we've done with our sister business, Williams Advanced Engineering, on batteries. We have quite a lot of batteries on site all the time. So can we use those and deploy them? Car charging for staff. I'm quite looking forward to the new arrival van. Just a bit of a hint there, Paul. If you for our van fleet, how can we be more sustainable? So it's all across the business. And actually, I think for me that's the interesting bit. Rather than just focusing on one thing, we need to look at everything you do, and try and get all of your management team and my management team engaged in every time they look at replacing something that's come out for life. How do we do something differently? What is the impact? You know, those boilers come into end of life. They're gas fired. Great. Well, what could we put in there? Do we need them? Could we recycle the heat from somewhere else in the business? That said, though, all of those do come with a cost as well, and also a lead time and time.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, massive congratulations on getting the order in for an arrival van within the first 5 minutes of the answer, James. They're super impressed. Paul's already checking the price point right now and getting the delivery schedule for us, which is great. I wanted to actually, a little bit later on, if we have time, is touch on the points you mentioned there around recruitment and employee engagement, and the bigger picture of culture within the team and how that's shifting now that there's a bigger drive towards sustainability and it's more front and center in business strategy. I guess going to Mark, you're from a Formula E team, slightly different to a typical F1 team in terms of the scale of manufacture within the team, but on the same point within your team, what kind of things are you doing that are really answering this sustainability question?
Well, I think we're sort of set up a lot differently. We operate the team. The cars are manufactured. The vehicles themselves all come from Spark. The powertrain's manufactured by DS, so they obviously are working on the same elements that James is working on in terms of manufacturing. As a race team, the majority of the carbon sort of footprint that we have is the travel. We do things quite reasonable amount differently than other motorsports. Actually, we put our cars in a box and we send it to the first race, and we don't see it the factory doesn't see it till it comes back at the end of the year. So DHL works hard with FIA and people like Cristiano, I know, on how to minimize the impact of freight. We're obviously trying to minimize that. We're trying to minimize down how much we take around the world. So we have we're trying to work together with all of the teams to reduce the amount of boxes we take around the world, see if we can reduce the amount of flights we take as well. So sustainability is a big element, and I think Cristiano will probably touch on it in a minute, but it's the first sport to be carbon neutral from inception. So Formula E's done a lot of work with the FIA, and now we're also looking into things like the teams being accredited properly with the quality standards that the FIA has been working on to make sure that all parts of motorsport can have a sustainable footprint. And then from just other areas, we're called to Cheetah, and obviously with the word cheetah in the name, we're working with Big Cat Sanctuary. You'll see one of the cats there behind. The cars, each car has a name of one of the cheetahs from the Big Cat Sanctuary down in Kent. We're also trying to see what other things we can do to support their habitat around the world. So we're trying to join in with the wildlife as well.
Yeah, I think that the global nature of our sports and the ability to touch different communities and have that legacy models, that's really interesting. That's really cool. I didn't know you named the cars after the cheetahs. That's cool. Paul, before I come to you, Cristiano, is it something you could give us more of an oversight on with the different organizations that you're involved in? What are the big things that you're seeing within those organizations from a sustainability point of view? I know James touched on the whole notion of not wanting to greenwash and actually be credible with what the organizations are doing in this space. So Cristiano, I don't know if you can hear me okay?
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Yeah, so from your perspective, kind of as an industry advisor, what are you seeing within the organisations you work with?
So we we work with quite a number of stakeholders across championship, across circuit, and federation, ASN. So we have to say that we're quite lucky because all the clients we have, they're all really committed to sustainability. We don't do greenwash. We're not a marketing company. I'm an engineer by background, so I'm very much data driven and data based on what actually the strategy that I propose or the action that I propose. So in that way, we kind of have seen in the industry, at least with the client we work, a very like their will to change and to contribute to this legacy between motorsport sustainability. But that is also been now driven from the top because the FIA have implemented their own strategy, and they've got, as Mark was mentioned, they've got an accreditation that's called FIA Environmental Accreditation. That at the moment is just very industry related, but hopefully will also grow to be relevant in the much bigger ecosystem of innovation because it's actually written with some of the ISO standard in it, so it's quite a complicated thing. But I have to say, it's like I always draw this parallel. 20 years ago, when I started in motorsport, the biggest problem was safety. Drivers were dying, and we needed to really improve the cars, and that's what we have done with FIA and with the teams and with everybody involved for the last 15 years. And this, obviously, as you've seen from the latest accident, that is very, well, it can happen, but it's not happening as frequently as before. So the next 15 years are the 15 years where everybody of the motorsport industry really need to try to focus on sustainability. That is the next big step to tackle. And if we want to survive as a sport, because at the end of the day, we are a sport that comes from marketing budget, we really need to help to do this shift. And the stakeholders are helping because they want it to be relevant and they want to be there. So motorsport is a really drop in the ocean for the carbon footprint. There are industries that are massively polluting much more than motorsport, but it's got a big impact because it got lots of fun. And so the impact that can have on changing behavior is much bigger of other industry that maybe are bigger carbon footprint, but haven't got that impact. And also internally as a company, we do quite a lot for being sustainable ourselves. So we have applied as well for the FIA accreditation as we were one of the stakeholders. So we wanted to make sure we are what we say, really. But we have committed to the B Corporation accreditation as well that we are carrying on just this month. And also we ask, for example, for most of our customers, whenever we engage with them, to offset our carbon footprint if there is any travel in it.
Right.
And the things we do a lot as well is to connect people in the industry and with academia as well, because I'm involved in the university as well. So we know the relevant technical advancement that are happening in terms of technology, more sustainable technology. So one of the things that we take great pride is to connect that advancement with stakeholders that we work with, so that we can actually augment this quest for being more sustainable.
Yeah, I think you touched on that. There's a real need for credibility within any organization that's developing something sustainable, that they're doing it in a sustainable way. I mean, it seems quite obvious, but it's something that I think is really important. And I think that probably leads on nicely to Arrival and the work that, how you run your organization for something that is pioneering, quite disruptive, and a whole new approach to building vehicles, but you're doing it in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Does that fit? Does that align with?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think absolutely. Founded 2015, the core kind of mission or focus on that kind of mass adoption of electric vehicles. We know that we need to get there somehow. But by doing it the same way we've done it for hundreds of years, we're not going to reach that kind of mass adoption. So our vehicles are a completely blank sheet approach. So there's no kind of existing architecture. We generate our own skateboard design for our vans and buses. And then all the componentry themselves, we're very vertically integrated. So we're actually controlling a lot of the kind of supply chain ourselves by actually producing these components. And then that sort of top hat can then be customizable and sort of relevant for local markets. So when we then look at the manufacturing side of it, we're then producing them in local markets for the local area, paying local taxes, being part of the local economy and making an impact locally, which is obviously decentralizing the kind of logistics and all those kind of sides, knock-on effects as well. So I mean, I think from our standpoint, what would our kind of core focus is about that kind of sustainable angle, but doing it in a kind of a very technological focused way. It's not just about the vehicles themselves; it's about how they're produced. Our microfactories actually are very low capex, low footprint, and we're deploying them in quite a steady incline of numbers globally to really get that mass adoption up there.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about these kind of satellite factories to reduce, to make local and to build local and use local resource. And I think from a sustainability perspective, I think F1's always been very good at working with small businesses, small medium enterprises, locally based, largely for efficiency, but clearly delivers a sustainability message as well. I guess, James, back to F1, obviously we do a lot of manufacture in-house, but the supply chain obviously has a big impact in the chain of custody and the overall footprint that the business makes. And so is the sustainability drive within Williams something that's also now filtering into all of the supply chain as well?
Yes, in summary, I think we are relatively lucky that an awful lot of our supply chain is relatively local to us, which is most good from a local economic value point of view, but also the sustainability piece. But I think our view is we're trying to get our own house in the best state possible, and then help them work with our suppliers to help them. They're quite a wide range, and we use from very small, very, very small businesses with a few people that are specialist services through to much larger ones. So our approach has been to lead by example and then help our suppliers move to that world. And there is a little bit though of how far do you go when you start tracing back the raw materials. That's somebody gets into a rather large industry, where as Cristiano probably highlighted, where the big gains will actually happen, and also working with our partners as well. The partners we have across Formula One, to work together so that we can help them and they can help us, and that's the basis of some of the partnerships that we take our work with B&R as an example, in terms of using technology to reduce our emissions and energy usage, but actually it's more also a showcase to show how it can work for their customer base. So we're probably most likely the people that have a much larger impact on the world than our relatively small plant here in rural Oxfordshire.
And a real tenuous link you mentioned partnerships, but there is a link between Formula One and Formula E. I know some people see them as competing motorsports, but you've got some interesting thoughts on where Formula E began and even roots links back to Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of traces a long way back. I think F1 was obviously working on KERS way back it got announced or brought in, in 2009. So it was well ahead of what was happening in Formula E, although in the background, FIA and people like myself and others were looking at electric race cars even back in those days. So my opinion is that, obviously Williams did the first battery and McLaren's doing the current battery, and Williams is going to do the next battery, I believe, right, James? So there's a huge amount of, interaction between the two groups. And I think, F1 started all the KERS development, and a lot of that technology, I believe, flowed down into the first motors that went, into the first vehicles. I think the Yasa motors that I helped spin out of Oxford, that I know fed into some of the programs in F1 and also fed into some of the first cars in Formula E. So there's definitely a lot of synergies in that area, and I'm sure there will continue to be more of those in the future.
And I guess, it kind of leads on to probably the big question, which is to everyone on the panel, and maybe, carrying on with yourself first, Mark, is what are the sports and your organizations offering to the wider world? What's the big sustainability innovations or solutions that are being developed in your industry, in your businesses?
I mean, I think electric vehicles themselves obviously are part of the future of cities. I think, as I said before, the clean air is a huge focus. And as Christiana pointed out, it was about safety before, but now because of COVID, I've got some great slides of pictures of various places in the world before and after during COVID, and as Lord Drayson said, I think at the beginning of Formula E, he said CO2 is difficult to explain to people, but clean air you can touch and feel, and you can actually see it in your daily life, and I think that's one of the biggest focuses. Obviously, electric vehicles are emission free at point of use, so we do have a lot of work to do to make sure that the energy that goes into those vehicles is renewable, and that's obviously something that we're working hard on in Formula E to make sure that all the events are fully sustainable. I think that's a huge part of it, and just encouraging. Like I've just got a DS3, put the plug in there. I've now converted to Octopus energy, so that's renewable, and I've got the charger in my house now, so I can say that I've got hopefully at least that part of the loop all tied up, and I know that probably James and Christiana are doing work in the background to make sure. One of the other complaints about electric cars is where are the batteries created? Are we using enough renewable energy in the manufacture of everything? And I think that's the big push to make sure that the total life cycle is as good as it can be.
And sorry, carry on, Christian.
Just on that, it's kind of like one of the things that we have introduced in the industry, and I think both James and Mark referred to me, is the life cycle assessment. It's kind of like I've been the motorsport life cycle assessment person at the moment. So I think that is quite an important innovation, I would say, for the motorsport industry, because it actually is looking at the whole, not just the supply chain, but from the a raw material to the manufacturer of a product. So it's kind of looking at a holistic view of the carbon footprint rather than just pigeonhole on the product. And that's, I think, is although it's not an innovation per se, because the life cycle assessment has been existing since a long time, bringing it to motorsport and having a model that works for motorsport, that is, I think, the big innovation that hopefully the big innovation that can make a change on how we operate in the industry, therefore can reduce the carbon footprint. And that is something that we've been working for 4 years now with Formula E, so it's kind of like very well established. It's something not yet established in other motorsport, but I'm sure that will become one of the best practice that needed to be done has been inserted in tender from the FIA, so we will see it moving. But definitely is something to make people really aware that carbon footprint is not just the race, it's not just the operation, it's the whole supply chain from cradle to grave, really.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, is that something that Arrival are having to consider? It's not just the sustainability, the sustainable manufacture of the vehicles, but their end use and the sustainable infrastructure. Is there anything that Arrival are learning from motorsport, or is it more independent and disruptive than that?
Yeah, I think this kind of circular word is definitely synonymous in, if you look at automotive and motorsport in parallel, they're kind of something we both sharing in common. And it's not just, as you say, it's not just the manufacturing, it's the parts that are being used. So taking, for example, our core material, our composite material that the vehicles are constructed from, it's our own proprietary material that we've produced ourselves that is sustainable in itself. But the way that we've produced it is such a way that we don't need metal stamping. We don't need a paint shop. We can actually produce those in these small footprint microfactories that saves on space, saves on extra steps in the manufacturing process, all together build up to create something that's more sustainable. And then these parts can then be ground down and reused for future products as well. So there's lots going on there inside. And there was a question in the chat, which I'll answer to as well, which was around, what is it or what kind of percentage or how much is actually localized in terms of the manufacturing? And the answer really is it's a tremendous amount. The supply chain team are working with local entities to kind of get that local supply chain. But actually, what we're finding globally is that there are certain mandates that certain percentages have to be made local. So America, for example, 70% has to be made by America in America. So, that's kind of, a constraint you have to abide within, but we're going above and beyond that as well as a company that's really focused on that sustainable manufacturing locally.
And how do you, so one of the questions that I'm taking from the audience, it's particularly the motorsport side, but certainly for Arrival as well, you're in a competitive environment. There's a lot of IP involved. How do you balance the competitive nature with what needs to be a collaborative thing to develop new technologies, new solutions? I guess Formula E is certainly different to F1, where it's more of a common platform. So there's more of a holistic view for the tech development there. But I guess to anyone who wants to volunteer and answer, is that a challenge, or is that something that just adds to the acceleration and gets people to work harder?
Well,
I'll give a brief perspective, but it's definitely, I think, something James and Mark can add a bit more colour to. But what I will say is that, in the 5 years we've been around, we've already got over 1,400 members of staff that are all, from various industries, all coming into a melting pot. And that's why we call ourselves a technology company, because we're kind of bringing in, the extremities of technology. But as part of our global growth strategy, we will put R&D centres in countries where we can bring in that local talent pool as well. But yeah, James and Mark, I think perhaps you can add a bit more around that than I can.
Yeah, I suppose it's always a tricky balance. The sort of how open or closed your innovation needs to be or can be. I think from my perspective, the competitive nature of motorsport causes the technology to be stress tested a lot faster, and that's the main advantage to it. And also, we are relatively brutal, and that's any form of motorsport in terms of failing fast. So if it doesn't work, we will just drop it and move on to the next thing and find something that does work. And I think other industries do struggle with perhaps still sticking with the same thing that doesn't really work. And looking further forwards, we talked a little bit about there's electrification. There's also multiple other types of power source as well. From biofuels through to hydrogen and other areas as well. So that will continually iterate. So I think the competitive nature of motorsport is really important. That said, though, there are points and opportunities where it makes sense to collaborate. And we will collaborate with other series and also with each other as and when we need to under the rules. And also, there is always going to be a little bit of dichotomy there, because we are a form of entertainment and we're a competition that's a form of entertainment. So we've got to make sure we are to actually deliver on our primary purpose, which is also being a form of entertainment as well. Not that I'm sure any of our engineers in either my organisation or Mark's organisation would agree that they actually provide entertainment and work in the media industry, but to some extent, if we don't make it an interesting show at the weekend, our whole business model struggles rather.
And you're right, and that is a big challenge. And you mentioned partners, and obviously, Mark, you're in a sport as well that relies heavily on sponsorship and partners. How have you found, particularly with the development of the technology over the last 7 seasons, how have you found that the positioning of Formula E from a sustainability standpoint has helped attract more partners and attract maybe different types of partners that can align with that strategy?
Yeah, I think probably simplistically, most people, if we go back to the fact that I think it's something like 60% of the world's GDP gets spent in cities, and we're trying to push electric cars in cities, then a lot of the partners you'll see, on my jumper here, people like Total, who is pushing towards more renewable energy, FSEC, who is a charging partner, who do charging systems in country, DS themselves obviously are pushing. I think they're one of the lowest CO2 companies in Europe now. I think, again, it comes back to relevance. Why is it relevant? It's relevant to cities. It's relevant to where the investment's going to go in the future. I think most countries in the world are talking about a green recovery, and therefore, if that's where the money's being spent, that's where people will focus. And then, just going back to the clean air again, to kind of bang on about that, there's what we've seen that people have seen. I think that's part of the future as well. And so therefore partners are interested in the relevance, the discussions that they can have around the world when we're in places like New York, Sanya, Hong Kong, in Mexico City. They get to talk to different people around the world, and we get to spread spread the word about the coming changes that we can see. And to James's point, I think motorsport is if you look at the old TRL levels, NASA's technology readiness levels, I think we're technology demonstrators. We're not always the final product. We, as James says, we have to move on to the next thing before we finalize something that could be commercialized. Hopefully DS, takes some of the technology that, we come up with in the race cars and can prove it, what we prove out in the race cars that can work, and they can take that to the road cars, which will be on the road for the next, 15, 20 years.
So with that, obviously, a great example of using motorsport to drive development into the parent company, and I guess Arrival is a business that are putting that end product into the consumer's hands. For each of you, I guess, what's the next big thing? I'm conscious we're about 5 minutes away from wrapping this up, so wanting to leave something around what's next. What are the big focuses for you in your organization? Christiana, what do you see in general as the next big move for all organization from a sustainability perspective? And I guess, Christiana, let's start with you first on that one. Let's go for the high level view.
Well, I think, as I said, it's like there is quite good signs that everybody is aligning on sustainability. So for us, as a company that drive other company sustainability strategy, is actually to encourage that change and to give that company the tools for them to learn and then to do it themselves. We don't want to be with there 10 years. We want to come in, teach them what they need, have a really robust data-driven strategy, and then they go off and do and implement it. So that's what we normally do. But also, as you possibly know, we serve motorsport 4 wheels, but we serve as well the 2 wheels, like with the scooter being our new customer. And we see lots of technological crossover as well between what motorsport has created in terms of software or battery development to what micromobility needs, and also on sustainability, because micromobility is not as sustainable as you may think, may have a lower carbon footprint itself, but the volume of sales is much bigger. So it's kind of like we need to make sure that the sustainability is addressed all through the technical parts of the scooter, so that we don't have like much more pollution. And it's kind of I know it seems a bit weird having a e-scooter motorsport championship, but that is kind of the next big things, like micromobility motorsport headings, at least on our agenda, and continue with our customer to drive the 4 wheels, but also like driving the micromobility. And we got other industry that are kind of talking with us as well, mainly sport industry, that want to learn how motorsport can become more sustainable, to see if there are some point of contact that is quite good. Well, I think that is actually really good, because again, as motorsport can drive the technology and bring it to the industry, I think we can do it as well on sustainability. We can learn from the industry without reinventing the wheels, transform it, make it more innovative and a new approach and really true and robust, and then give it back to the industry. And that's what I can see motorsport will be really useful for sustainability, actually.
Which is great, isn't it? Because that was where motorsport began. It was that development, that hotbed. It was from the moment there were 2 cars, there was racing, and so yeah, it's great to see that carrying on. I love the e-scooter championship. They look frighteningly, scarily fast things, though. I'm not sure.
Which we are doing quite a lot, because the 2 legacy that e-scooter want to give to micromobility is sustainability and safety as well. So there is we got on board Andy Mellor from XFIA that is carrying on all the crash tests and all the things. So it's kind of like that will be addressed as well. Don't worry.
Good. Yeah, I was worried for a moment with your background in safety and then getting on these little scooters and racing around. Paul, I'm conscious we've got a couple of minutes left. So, what's next for Arrival? Where's it going, and what's the sustainability angle to that?
Yeah, I think just picking up from what Christina's saying there, what we're focusing on is this kind of multimodal integrated transportation solutions for cities, as Mark's touched on it as well. Kind of the focus for cities is to actually be active in being, making the change going forward. One of the things I wanted to kind of pick up on was around the autonomy that's associated with our vehicles. Our vehicles are autonomy ready, and we kind of, for the time being, are doing kind of safe environment testing. So you might have seen we've got an order with UPS for 10,000 vehicles, and what we're focusing on with them initially is around the kind of closed environment. So back at the depot, when the vehicle arrives back at the depot, when it gets cleaned, recharged, restocked for the next day, that can all be done autonomously in a very safe environment. But taking that to its kind of final conclusion, if you can then have those vehicles on the road, say at night, to alleviate sort of traffic on the roads during the day, have more pedestrianised cities and streets as well, that's where we can see all this kind of this swell going towards.
Was that 10,000 vehicles? Can we make it 10,002 and send a couple to James? Maybe.
Yeah, James, we should talk after this, because we're not too far from you, so we can definitely host you and show you some of our cool vehicles.
James, just I guess for Williams, what's next? As much as you're able to talk about from a sustainability strategy point of view, what's on the cards?
Yeah, so as many of you are aware, the Williams family have stepped back from the business, so we are now owned by Dorothy Capital, and they reaffirm their commitment to sustainability, and it actually forms one of our key pillars of our business strategy going forwards. I think the focus really, I can't really say too much about what we're doing going forwards, but there's a number of big, quite significant changes on site plan that link into this. And our sustainability will become a core pillar of the business strategy, linked in with both our partnerships and how we operate and run the business from a sort of set of objectives that are cascaded throughout the business. That's really quite a big step for the business to have that front and centre within its business strategy, and not one that often people would expect to see for a business that people assume goes racing every weekend.
And that's great to hear. And Mark, I guess finishing with yourself. So what's next for DST Cheetah and Formula E?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of exciting things coming up in Formula E in the future with the Gen 3 vehicles and fast charging and all the things that are relevant to electric vehicles on the road. And I'll keep banging on about renewable energy and those kind of things to make the whole process, the whole life cycle net zero. Also, obviously, Formula E itself is continuing to push on those areas, and we'll keep working with the FI and Formula E on being sustainable as events and traveling around the world.
Fantastic. Well, I know we're a minute over time now, so and that's my fault for being a terrible host. So, just a big thank you to all of you for joining the panel discussion and helping support this session. I appreciate you're all very busy, and without you, it would have been a very quiet and very boring session. So, thank you very much for that. And again, just one last time, just thanks to everyone behind the scenes at the MTC that have made the summit happen. Appreciate you inviting us along to the final day of the summit. And with that, I would like to hand back over to Daisy.
Well, Al, thank you so much. And far from it, your false modesty there, your fantastic moderating skills were much appreciated. So a big thank you to you and, of course, to all your panelists for that session. Such an interesting topic of conversation, and I can see by the number of questions that you were getting that our audience thought so too. We are now going to have a very quick comfort break, but do join us back here at 11 o'clock when I'll be welcoming former Royal Air Force pilot Mandy Hickson to the stage. She has an amazing story to tell, and she's a fantastic speaker. So I know you're not going to want to miss that session. So just a quick reminder, back here, main stage, 11 o'clock. See you then. Bye-bye. Well, hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this session, Choose Your Flight Path. Well, I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce Mandy Hickson to the stage. Mandy was the only female pilot on her frontline Tornado squadron, flying multi-million pound fast jets for the Royal Air Force. She has operated in hostile environments, including patrolling the no-fly zone over Iraq. Carrying the latest weaponry, she and her unit were ready to drop ordnance on any target in support of operations. So drawing on her experiences of strategic decision-making, leadership under intense pressure and communicating to inspire others, Mandy will tell us her story now. And I'm really, really thrilled to say that she's also happy to take some questions after her talk. But for now, Mandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Daisy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to join you all. And you know what, it's particularly nice for myself because, of course, I had the opportunity of joining you at Camp 2. So here we are, we've got a re-attack from Mandy Hickson. Now, I've talked about today choosing your flight path because I think so often in life we can feel that our trajectory is determined basically by the organization, maybe by the culture, by choices we make. But what I would say is very small changes that you make at this stage, be it within the organization, but also be it within your own cultures, actually can make huge monumental differences in the outcomes in the end. And you know what, just to get you back into the mindset, for anyone that didn't see me at the first event at Camp 2, I'm going to simply start by inviting you all to step into my office.
Roger, and you are clear for display. The wind at the moment 29011, crosswind 7 from the right.
Boom. That's basically how you take a 17-year career and you just compress it into a 1-minute pop video. I think that's the way forward in life, is it not? Now, the interesting thing about flying the Tornado, you know, obviously it's a very, very long training process. You don't just arrive in the Air Force and end up flying a mighty aircraft like this. You know, you start off by flying something pretty basic. For myself, it was the Bulldog. I then progressed pretty quickly onto the Tucano. Now, this felt like a monumental step up. You know, it had an undercarriage that went up. We used jet fuel. It smelt differently. It was exciting. And it was while I was flying Tucanos that I had my first major or noticeable safety incident. Basically, I was flying my first ever solo. I mean, it's an exciting day. I had been put to fly with the chief instructor. What an honor. Yes, he has the opportunity of selecting one student and he happened to choose me. We were operating out of Linton on Ouse as normal, which is the base up in Yorkshire. Unfortunately, that airfield was really busy that day. So he said to me, Mandy, let's just deploy to a different airfield. I'd never operated from this different airfield before. I was a bit nervous. We landed at Dishforth and he said, just taxi round to the air traffic control tower. I'll leap out and I'll watch you do your first solo, which is a couple of circuits in the around the airfield, and then come and pick me back up. So I taxied up to the tower. He got out. I shut the aircraft top down. And basically, one of the things that you're always meant to do at this point is you're meant to remove your seat pin. Now, you're sitting on an ejection seat. You do not want, basically, on the ground, the seat to be able to fire. So basically, on the ground, the seat is made safe by a physical pin that you can see at the bottom. As you get airborne, you want to remove this pin and you stow it. Normally, you would stow it before you taxi and you would show the ground crew the pin as you remove it. Now, obviously, here I am, he's leapt out. I'm completely out of odds with all of my procedures. My checks are out of order. I do my circuits, I land, I go to pick him up, I go to take the seat pin out, and I realize with horror, I've actually left it in the seat. If I'd had an emergency, I would not have been able to eject. Now, what did I do about it? I'm right at the start of my career. I'm flying with the chief instructor. I tell no one. I got away with it. And the reason I'm sharing that story is because ultimately, when we don't tell people about these things, then we never can learn, can we? And the Air Force at the time, and aviation as a whole 25 years ago, was a very different place. There was a blame culture that existed as well. And so actually, ultimately, I was sitting in a bar 3 weeks later, and we'd all had a few drinks. Someone said, "Oh my goodness, you're never going to guess what I did on my first solo." And I said, "What?" They said, "I forgot to remove my seat pin." And when they said that, I just thought with horror, so did I. Now, out of the 12 of us on our course, 3 of us had forgotten to remove our seat pins. Now, it was at this point we decided we needed to do something. We couldn't just not share things, because actually, what would we have done if one of our colleagues had needed to eject and they had forgotten to do it and we hadn't said anything? And so actually we made a small pact, and we started making our, a little notepad and actually sharing all the errors that we made, but we never ever pushed it further. I then progressed through to fly Hawks based at RAF Valley in Anglesey. Oh, an incredible year. It's where Prince William was based, but sadly we never overlapped. Otherwise, I do believe the royal wedding could have been very different, and who knows, I could have been on Oprah last week. And then I was posted to the operational conversion unit to fly the mighty Tornado. Incredible opportunity. I was so excited. I mean, talk about the step up. This is going from flying or driving a mini metro to a Formula One car. And one of the first opportunities we came upon was when our operational conversion unit was posted out to Goose Bay in Canada. I mean, what an incredible opportunity, right at the start of flying the Tornado, and we had a 2-week detachment to Canada. The flying out there is phenomenal. Ordinarily, you fly a lot of low-level trips, but actually the stage we were at in the course meant that we were going to be doing air combat. Okay. Seems a bit of a waste, I know, for this amazing landscape, and you can fly down there as low as 100 feet. But we were doing air combat. So one pilot basically pitting their skills against their opponent, and you're technically trying to shoot the other one down. I went off on my trip with one of my great friends, Rob. We were going to be doing what's called merges, where 2 pilots come together and you have these merges. We were flying to the best of our abilities. Now, one thing that we are taught about when you go to Goose Bay, it's got a very unusual runway. The runway is basically split into 2 halves. It's very, very wide for starters. And actually, because they often have quite extreme weather conditions out there, it's ridged on one side, which basically means that if it's raining a lot, you're meant to land on that side because it stops you from aquaplaning. And the second right-hand side of the runway is smooth. Now, they always say if you're coming back and the airfield is wet, or we call it contaminated, they say always land on the left-hand side of the runway. Now, that's something that you need to remember, obviously. Now, we went off and we were flying our air combat. There were huge thunderstorms everywhere. You know what? Our instructors in the back seat said, if we can just get one more merge in, then we can get this sortie ticked off on the list, and we won't have to do it again. We contacted base and they said, there are some really big clouds and big thunderstorms going through, guys. You might want to come back. We said, well, we'll just do this one more merge. When we finished, we were right on our fuel minimums. We contacted the base. And they said, right, there's a very quick gap that you can land. Otherwise, we're sending aircraft off to be diverted. We said, okay, we can land through these thunderstorms. As I was coming down, air traffic control said to me, are you happy to accept a talk down from a student, from a trainee? I said, yes, of course I can. Now, when you're talked down, basically, you're coming down this glide path and you have a localizer. And often from air traffic control, they'll be saying 2 degrees left, 3 degrees right, up a bit, down a bit. Oh no, I was having 5 degrees left, 10 degrees right. And as I'm flying down this glide slope, I'm thinking, this is not good. Either my flying is appalling, the weather conditions are really extreme and we're getting buffeted, or this talk down is particularly poor. Every single one of these things should have been a red flag. But was it? No, it wasn't. Because ultimately I was young, I was inexperienced, and I believed that actually I was invincible. As we're coming down 10 degrees left, I popped out of cloud at 200 feet. I looked up and I am lined up, not with the runway, but with the apron, with all of our aircraft lined up on it. I thought, I've got to get this aircraft on the ground. I know I can be the girl. I threw the aircraft over to the right and I lined up and I thought, you have done it, Mans. I landed smack on the center line. Boom. I engaged my thrust reverse. And as I did so, I had forgotten about the fact that it was now contaminated. The runway was completely flooded. As I engaged thrust reverse, my entire aircraft spun through 90 degrees. We are now traveling sideways at 160 miles an hour. My navigator at this point did not shout, "Oh my goodness, we're skidding." He said, "Loss of directional control on the ground." Now, in doing so, he immediately triggered the response action, because actually we're taught so much in the simulator, trying to cover every single emergency. So when it happens, you're not just flailing around trying to react. You're basically just pulling out a set of procedures and you're instantly actioning them. And so my hands went to exactly the right places. I did the right drills, but we continued skidding. At this point, he said, "I'm not ejecting yet." Now, that was quite a horrific statement because I hadn't even considered the thought of ejecting up to this point. I'll be brutally honest. But I carried and we stuck with it. As we finally drew to a standstill, we were lined up almost here exactly with the taxiway to release the, leave the runway. And it was quite funny, really, because as I powered up, we started to go backwards and I was at such huge capacity overload that he said, "Mandy, your thrust reverse is in." I was like, "Oh, right, okay." I mean, we got off the runway and we had a talk about it. It was probably as close as I had ever been to actually crashing an aeroplane. And it had been going in slow motion, because when things happen in the air, they happen with speed. They happen really quickly, but on the ground, it was in slow motion. Now, I'd learned from my experience, obviously, at Linton News, and the first thing that we did was we shared that with the whole squadron, because ultimately this was one of those threats that was residing. It was one of those latent threats. We'd been briefed on the fact that the runway was, half ridged and half smooth, but ultimately something like that can actually really come to bite you. Now, at the end of the OCU, I was posted to I was posted down to RAF Marham to 2 Squadron. I mean, this was a huge honor. I was the first woman to serve on this squadron as a pilot. And one of the first opportunities I had on the squadron was we were posted out to an amazing exercise called Red Flag out in Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base. I mean, the logistics behind getting out here are phenomenal. You're up against the best pilots that America have in the form of Red Air, or the baddies. So their sole job in life is to try to shoot you down. Now, the area that you're flying in replicated the area that we were working in as a conflict zone at the time, which was the Middle East and Iraq. So actually we're operating in similar temperatures, similar desert scenarios, and we were up against sort of live threats that they had on the ground as well. Now, I mentioned the logistics. Now, there are 63 different trades in the Air Force, and even for an exercise, you know what? So many of those trades are involved to get you to the point where you can even launch a mission. I always think the engineers are just so integral in that whole process. Culturally, when we talk about, trust, I trusted in them implicitly, because every time I get airborne, my life is quite literally in their hands, and I never had any doubt in them. Now, I was put to fly out there with a very experienced navigator called Michel Dupont. Can you imagine having someone with so much more experience sitting 2 meters behind you at all time? It meant that my learning curve was vertical. It was phenomenal just having somebody to assist you, to ensure that we made the best quality decisions together. In fact, I had a funny incident with Michelle one evening. I mean, I know many of you are thinking, I'm sure you're pleased to be with Michelle because obviously it looks a little bit like George Clooney. I mean, not that that had anything to do with it. But we went out for dinner, not the 2 of us, the whole squadron. It was the first night that the guys had ever seen me out of my very attractive grow bag, as it's called, the green suit. And so I put a dress on. I even had, I think, a little bit of makeup on for the occasion. I arrived 5 minutes late. Known techniques, obviously. I arrived, I coughed loudly. All the guys were in the foyer. But more importantly, Michel looked up. Our eyes met across the crowded room. And he said, "Oh, Mandy, you are looking beautiful this evening." At which point, the guy next to him hit him across the back of the head and said, "You can't say that to Mandy. She's one of the boys." At which point, Michel turned back with a Gaelic shrug of his shoulders and he said, "Puh, you Brits, you have so much to learn about women." And you know what? It was such a funny point because it was sort of quite pivotal to me, because I think at that point I had probably been overcompensating. I'd arrived on this squadron and I was the only woman and I was trying to fit in. I was probably being a bit too, blokey, should we say. I was swearing more. I'd started to drink more. And I realized quite quickly, and especially in this moment, that actually it was going to be so important for myself to keep my true identity, be true to who I was. Now, the flying out there is unbelievable. The philosophy is that you train harder than you will ever have to fight for real. And we'd already learned now how to fly our aircraft, and now I was learning how to fight it. At the end of the 2 weeks, we were tasked to bring the jets home. It's a 3-day affair. The first day is not too bad, but the second day something is missing. Land. Yes, to get you across the Atlantic, you'll be doing air-to-air refueling. So what you have is an airliner like this one, and it is full of fuel, and it basically has a hose hanging out the back with a basket on it. All you have to do is extend your probe and place it into the moving basket. Now, as you're all looking at this, you're all thinking, well, that looks easy. We're told in the final stages not to look at the basket. They say, just leave it in your peripheral vision. Obviously, that's easier said than done. Often when you're in thick cloud, the basket is no longer stable. You can barely see the aircraft that you're formating next to. And literally, you can be often just focusing on a strobe. This can happen, clear air turbulence. Suddenly, that is literally a moving platform. And it's quite frankly like stabbing in the dark. If you ram your probe in too hard, you will damage all of the basket and ingest the metal. To put on top of that, you have words of guidance, wisdom, and encouragement from your wingmen, who are literally going, oh, she's missed again. It was a lovely moment. Anyway, we landed in the Azores and we woke up the following morning to these beautiful blue skies. I thought, oh, it's going to be a great day. We entered the first tanking bracket and we hit this wall of cloud that was so thick, we could barely even see the jet we're formatting on. And it was at that point I heard the most chilling radio call. America have just shut their airspace. We could think of no situation in history whereby a continent would be shutting down. But we're taught a really great little phrase in the military. It's called control the controllables. And if you can't, let it go. Now, when you feel that classic stress bucket filling up, often it fills up with all the ancillary tasks, those superfluous issues that we can't do anything about. And yet they still fill the bucket up. If we can physically remove those in our minds and say we cannot do anything about those, then it gives you the ability to prioritize on what is important at that moment in time. Now, we went through this and basically we decided that we couldn't do anything because we didn't know what was happening out there. But one thing we were very aware of, obviously, was that if this continent has shut down, then every aircraft that was heading over there might be being turned back. Are they being diverted? Do we have a risk of a mid-air collision? We're in thick cloud after all. So we started to scan the airspace in front of us to clear our passageway through it. And as we came over the UK, we heard the next chilling radio call. There was an American aircraft carrier, much like this one, that was on an exercise, and it has a 5-mile exclusion zone around that ship. Unfortunately, an aircraft similar to what I'm going to show you was heading directly towards the ship. The Americans believed it was a terrorist and was about to shoot this down. We heard that they were loading live weapons and they were warning this aircraft that if it did not divert its course, then they would be shooting it down. Now, again, we're taught a decision-making model, and it really helps and stops people from procrastinating over decisions. It ensures that good quality decisions are made quickly. The first thing that we do is we say, how much time do we have? That's what's in the center. The next thing we do is we diagnose the problem. And as the leader, you never say to people what you think the problem is. You only ask your team what they think it is, because ultimately you're no longer contaminating those team members with your impressions. If they feed back and see that exactly what you're seeing, you know you're all on the same page. You're sharing the same mental model. The next thing you do is you ask your team for options. Again, not putting your opinion forward. They come up with all of the information. You, as the leader, make the decision, assign the tasks, and review it. And consequently, you can run through this really quickly. I mean, there are some influences. If you're in a high-risk, time-limited environment, you tend to make intuitive decisions, which often we have to do when we're flying. Once the time becomes more available, we get into rule-based. We say, right, a little bit like I did when my nav shouted, you know, loss of directional control on the floor, on the ground. I instantly went into my rules. What we're hoping to get to is that analytical stage where actually you have a little bit more time on your hands and you can really come up with some great option generation. Obviously, in the aviation world, we don't often get into that creative thinking mode because often time is the limiting factor. Now, we went through Dodo because, again, we realized that what we were hearing was the most unusual scenario known to man. An American ship just off the south coast about to shoot down a civilian in peacetime. It was almost like it was a joke. In the end, we asked air traffic control, could we help? Could we do anything? They gave us radar vectors. And in the end, we started to dive down from our height. Just before we got this, we managed to get through to this guy on the radio. We got him to divert his course. And we found out that he had a matter of minutes to run before he would have been shot down over the Solent on that beautiful September's afternoon. It was to change my future because I was almost immediately posted out to Iraq, where I would then serve for the next 3 years on rolling 3 monthly detachments. Now, I learned so much about my time in the Air Force, you know, an incredible 17 years. I learned about leadership, about decision-making, about accountability on your decisions. But I also saw this huge journey that the Air Force and aviation took in that period of time over a blame culture towards a more open and honest reporting culture. When I left, I wasn't quite ready to hang up my flying boots, so I signed up as a volunteer reservist. For 8 years, I flew cadets from the Air Training Corps, from the cadets, aged 13 to 18-year-olds. On one occasion, I was flying this young man. He, I'll say, wasn't the most effervescent personality I've ever flown with. And as we were taxiing out, I was fairly tired. We were reaching the point where the holding point, it's called. We're taxiing out and I thought, I know, I'll do my checks on the roll. You're allowed to do that. It's the last trip of the day. And I thought, do you know what I can do? I'll start my clock a little bit early. I won't start it like I normally do. I normally only ever start my stopwatch when I'm cleared for takeoff. But I thought, do you know what? I can just give him 25 minutes rather than 30. You know, he won't know any different. The only instrument they tend to recognize is indeed the stopwatch. So I do my checks. I start my stopwatch on the taxi out. We drew to a halt at the holding point. And basically I said to air traffic control, you know, Bravo 32, I am ready for departure. They said hold. I then continued to do my checks. And as I looked down, my brain saw that my stopwatch was running. My processing instantly told me that I was cleared to take off because ultimately I only ever used to start my stopwatch when I was cleared to take off. It's not a written rule, it was just something I used to do. I immediately took my brakes off. I started to power up. I looked to the right, and as I looked to the right down the runway, there were 2 jets coming in to land. I thought, hold on a minute, air traffic control have just cleared me to take off. This is ridiculous. I said, air traffic, just confirm I was cleared for takeoff. They said negative. We said hold. I looked at the cadet next to me. He looked back and he went, and I thought, oh God, I've messed up. But I hadn't crossed the line. In fact, I'd actually done nothing wrong. I'd even got, you know, clarification before I crossed that line. So what did I do on this occasion? I'm now 25 years down the line in my flying experience. I was excited. We did the trip. I landed. The first thing I did was I put in a safety report. There were so many fantastic human factor examples of learning that I could share with every single person in the Air Force. You know, I'd broken a small procedure of my own. I'd done my checks on the roll. My information processing was broken down. You know, I basically was complacent. I'd heard clear for takeoff 10 times already that day. So there was so much I could share and I was physically excited to do so. And it was fascinating because when I was talking to my sister, who is a medical director of a hospice, she said, we still got a long way to go, I believe, in medicine. Because when I hear that story, Mandy, I think that we're still at a point where we would try to hide that. We got away with it. Now, you'd got away with it. You had no need to share it. You hadn't broken any rules. But you wanted to share it because it might prevent somebody else from having an accident. And actually, it made me realize just how much the culture had improved. You know, you don't realize it when you're in that scenario, you know, what is culture? And I love this statement. It's how we do business around here. Can I put the caveat on? When no one's looking. And I think that's so important, because we can behave in a certain way, can't we, when we're being audited, when the boss is around, when we've got managers looking over our shoulders. But are we intrinsically behaving in that way when there's nobody to judge you? It's what you're doing in your soul. And actually, something that the aviation industry came up with was this term just culture. And it changed the way we did business. They said basically it's written down, it's almost Bible. A just culture is a culture that recognizes that competent professionals make mistakes and acknowledges that even those same competent professionals will develop unhealthy norms, shortcuts, routine rule violations, but there's zero tolerance for reckless behavior. So now we've got a line in the sand. It's almost, you know, written on every single wall you see. If I make a mistake, I need to tell people, and there will be no punitive action. But if I go over the line into, you know, reckless behavior, then ultimately I can expect to have some sanctions placed upon me. And by having this culture, it's changed the way that people report, because people are at the heart of every single organization. If we have the right culture, then people start to become confident and they start to report. They don't just report about things. That's the first age of reporting. They then don't report about just other people's mistakes, which is the second age of reporting, when we blame other people. I got a poor handover. That's why we made a mistake. They start to report about themselves, the third age of reporting, where the reports read, I made a mistake. Then we have data. We can understand the true risk. We can make risk-based decisions, and we know where to spend that ever decreasing pot of money. Those resources are basically applied in the right way, because for every one major event, and for us, that's often a loss of life, there will be 30 minor incidents which did require a mandatory report. But underneath your waterline, there's going to be 300 near misses. And there has been so many studies on this, and they've all come up with exactly the same details. I think one was 297 near misses. But if you're finding out about your 300 events, it stops you from just being reacting when you have the one major event. It enables us to be proactive, because we are basing our risk-based decisions on fact, on data. And so culture is at the absolute heart of it. Now, you know what, the cadet flying I did, honestly, I loved it. And it was a lovely way to sort of round off this career that I'd had in the industry as well, and in aviation as a whole. On one occasion, I was flying this young girl. She walked out to the aircraft, and I'll be honest, my heart fell, because I saw her. She was quite, you know, looked quite angry. I mean, I've been in lockdown with 2 teens, so I'm fully conversant in that look. But as she strapped in, I said, "Hi, my name's Flight Lieutenant Mandy Hickson. What's yours?" She said, "Emily." I thought, joy to the world, half an hour with you. She gets in, she's got so much eye makeup on, I'm really concerned that under G-force, the weight of this mascara might actually prevent her from opening her eyes. But as we taxied out, we got airborne. It was a beautiful sunny day, white fluffy clouds. We started to fly up, down, left, right. This girl is brilliant. She's so natural. We started to do some turns, 30 degrees initially. Most cadets go up and down by 200 or 300 feet, but not Emily. Emily rolls in. She went round on the rails. I said, wow. I said, I don't normally do this on someone's first trip. I want to see if you can do a 60-degree turn. I said, what you need to do on this one? At which point she physically held her hand between us and went, don't tell me. Read about that in a book somewhere. Oh my goodness, really? I'll tell you what happens. When you roll to 60, you're masking a lot of the lift over the wings, especially on the tutor. So you have to add full power, pull back on the stick. Otherwise, your nose comes slicing through the horizon and you end up in a spiral descent to death. At this point, I think, oh, crack on. So I give her control. She rolls in. She adds the power. She pulled back on the stick. She did it perfectly. I cannot tell you how annoying this was. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to teach you how to do aerobatics. Let's do a loop. We're going to lower the nose, 140 knots, tense your legs and your tummy, otherwise the blood will pool in your feet. As you get down there, you're going to pull hard back on the stick, keeping that stick right towards your stomach. You're looking for the horizon. When you see it, you yell, yeehaw, at the top of your voice. I said, and then you're going to pull out the bottom. I said, don't be scared, Emily. At the bottom, the whole aeroplane will shake violently. It means you've hit perfection. It means you're going through your own slipstream. So I demonstrated my loop, and let's just say it was lovely and smooth. There was no shaking. I give her control. I have control, ma'am. She rolls in, she lowers the nose, she pulls up, she goes through the horizon. I yelled, yeehaw. She did not. She pulled out the bottom of her loop there, and the whole thing shook violently. she looks across at me. She has suddenly got this radiant smile on her face. And that smile said to me, I'm better than you. And I thought, I'm going to break you. Oh, sorry, motivate you to be the very best version. Anyway, I wanted to break her. Threw everything at this girl. She's brilliant. We landed this aeroplane. We were taxiing it in. I said, do you know what, Emily? I've been flying now for about 28 years. I said, in all that time, I've never flown with anyone with so much raw, natural talent as you. And do you know what she said to me? I bet you say that to everyone. I was like, ah, could have shaken her, but you're not allowed to touch them. I said, I've never said it to anyone before. Is this something you might want to do? Because you're brilliant. She said, you're joking. I said, no. And she went, oh, Mum, this is all I've ever wanted to do. I was so scared that I was going to fail. I decided not to try, not to show you I was interested, because I thought, well, I was ever given loads of effort and then I failed. Well, we'll blame it. I was like, oh my goodness, calm down. It transpires that this was her dream. It was all she'd ever wanted to do. And she'd been so scared she was going to fail. She decided not to try, not to engage. I said, Emily, you can't live your life like that. I said, how many opportunities are going to go whipping by unless you grab them with both hands? I said, how are you doing at school? And she went, that, I hate it. I said, that enables this and you're brilliant. I could see the cogs whirring. I could see that purpose, that goal suddenly coming into the forefront of her mind. I saw this girl a year later. She walked past me in the corridor and I thought, gosh, that girl's got a lot of eye makeup on. I think it might be her. She went, I bet you don't remember me. I thought, I better do, because I'd started using her in my speech by then. I didn't say that, obviously. I said, Emily. She went, Mum, I'm so pleased you're here. I just wanted to tell you, I got all my GCSEs. I'm doing my A-levels and I really want to be a pilot. And when she said that, it was such a light bulb moment for myself, because I'd been on a flight path myself to about to go into the airlines. I'd done all my commercial pilot's licenses. I'd made an assumption that I had one skill set and that was flying. And it was in that moment when I realized that I'm going to use a wonderful quote from one of the first female astronauts, you cannot be what you cannot see. And actually we need more female role models as you know, to go into schools, to encourage youngsters to believe in themselves, that these careers are open to anyone. And I therefore decided to completely change what I was doing and make this my passion and my career. And I also think it behoves all of us to overcome that fear of failure, where we back away from things, where we don't give something 100%. And it was interesting because I'd been doing this talk for a couple of years. And a great friend of mine said, Mandy, I'm thinking about climbing up Kilimanjaro. I said, good for you. That's great. Well done. She said, no, I'm telling you because I want you to come. I said, oh, I can't possibly. I'm really busy. I've got a career. And she said, Mandy, you've been talking the talk. Maybe it's time to start walking the walk. And I thought, good point. So I signed up to climb up Kilimanjaro in October last year. Oh, October, 18 months ago now. And it was with 20 women from all walks of life, from all over the world. And it was phenomenal. I'd never worked with women before. I was slightly anxious about that, ironically. Which was madness, because it was the most wonderful group of individuals I have ever met. Every morning it started with beautiful blue skies, but by lunchtime the weather was coming down. It was pouring with rain. We were drenched through to our skin. And it would have been easy for the morale to get low, but there was one thing that picked us up every single time. And it was the wonderful Tanzanian voices. And the trip was going well. You know, I was loving it. I was really fit and healthy. I wasn't suffering too much from altitude sickness, which was unbelievable. And then day 5 hit. Basically, we were due to summit that night. And basically, the tent in the background says it all.
So I've been putting posts out for all the good stuff. I thought I might share one now about the pretty bad stuff. So here we are, there's Killy in the background. Day 5, we're going to be summiting this evening. And I've been up all night with a horrendous stomach bug. So I feel like I've been run over by a bus. No energy at all. But yeah, pretty bad. So as Joe, our wonderful leader, would say, I'm going to suck it up, buttercup, get a bit of a grip, and basically try and rehydrate. So there's no way I'm missing that beast behind me. So that's me on day 5.
Yeah, it wasn't good, basically, and that's what happens to your hair when you haven't washed it for 6 days. But going back to that theme of controlling the controllables, what could I do about this? Well, I could drink water. I was so dehydrated. I had about 8 litres of water. I had more Imodium than you can literally shake a stick at. And one thing that was keeping me going was that great sense of purpose. I had that fixation on this goal, the thought of reaching the summit. And it just feels so applicable to share this story, obviously, as we finally reached the summit on this incredible journey that you've all been taking with MTC. You know, I wanted to reach the rooftop of Africa at sunrise. That was not what we had, though. We opened our tents at 11 o'clock at night, and there was this complete whiteout, a snow blizzard. One of our Sherpas described it afterwards as the worst conditions he has ever seen in his 300 summit attempts. Basically, it didn't take us 6 hours. It took us 9 hours. And by the time I got there, I had nothing left to give. I was very, very poorly the whole way up. But I finally held this flag up and I went, get me off this bloody mountain, basically. By the time we got back down, it had taken so long that we didn't have time to have a rest. We just carried straight down to the next camp down. So we were walking almost solidly for 16 hours. And there was only one reason that I managed to make it, and that is the team. Now, I know we've talked of team on this whole journey you've been on. We've talked about energy. We've talked about firing people up. Well, these guys were the people that fired them up. They had this wonderful mantra: one team, one dream, more fire, more water. Poli poli, which means slowly, slowly. Tutafrika huru, which means slowly, slowly. Together, we will summit.
One team, more fire, more water, more fire,
and it sits with my mantra in life. We can have dreams, we can believe them, but unless we put them into action, we are going nowhere. You have got to dream it, believe it, and do it. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to stop sharing and hand back now to Daisy, and we're happy to take any questions.
Wow, Mandy, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. So much to get our teeth stuck into, and such an incredible story. So exciting also, so many of your videos. And I love the story of Emily. As the mother of a teenage daughter myself, I really could see a lot of team in your description of her. We, as Mandy said, we're going to kick things open to the floor for questions. So if you have any questions for Mandy, you can use the Q&A section box at the bottom of your screen. Mandy, one of the things that occurred to me listening to you is, particularly when you were mentioning your sister who's in healthcare, was how much of what you were saying was so relevant to Matthew Syed's book, Black Box Thinking, where he makes exactly this point about how aviation is the gold standard for organizations who learn by mistakes. And he directly compares it to healthcare and says, unfortunately, healthcare has always been the worst at this, partly because of the hierarchical structure of consultants and surgeons being at the top of the tree, and clerical workers and some nurses being lower down the pecking order, and that being one of the reasons why mistakes aren't reported or learnt from. And I wondered if I could just pick your brain a little bit on that issue of how hierarchies, his theory is, stop people learning from mistakes. And obviously the armed forces are about as hierarchical as they get.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I've worked with Matthew many times, actually, and in fact, just before I was due to speak with him, he just released Black Box Thinking, and I thought, oh God, I better read this. And as I was flicking through it in quick time on a Sunday afternoon, I was like, oh my gosh, it's everything I talk about. So yeah. I think the really great thing for working with Matthew and myself together was I've got the practical, actual lived life experience of exactly what he was talking about. And one thing that when we brought in human performance factors, we called it crew resource management or team resource management. It's used in the medical world. We assumed a lot of it would be about hierarchical gradient. And to be honest, Daisy, it is, but there's so much more to it than that. So to begin with, in aviation, they tried to flatten the gradient. They said, hold on a minute, we've got these hierarchical levels, whereas this junior person doesn't feel empowered to challenge, their voices are not heard. So therefore we need to flatten the gradient. And they worked really hard to flatten the gradient. In doing so, did it stop aeroplanes from crashing? Absolutely not. In fact, they saw a rise. Why? Because, of course, it's not about flattening the gradient. It's actually about creating a synergistic working environment. So it's about giving the junior person a voice, giving them tools to challenge, how to be assertive, not aggressive, but to ensure that, therefore, they can be heard. And you know, they've worked really hard on this in operating theatres as well, whereby often it's that whole feeling of a surgeon. And I know Matthew uses a story of basically, it's called Just a Routine Operation, Martin Bromley, and he lost his wife Elaine. And Martin has become an ambassador in this, of basically really trying to share the difference that human performance factors and training around how we as humans work together can make a huge difference. And he is inspirational as well. You know, he's literally traveled all over the world sharing his story.
I think it's so interesting. And I once interviewed a chap, I bet you've come across him as well, and unfortunately I can't remember his name. He was a great Ormond Street children's heart surgeon who used, I mean, coming back very relevant to this event, Formula One techniques of pit stop, of how to, because he worked out that the mistakes that were being made were once that patient left the operating theatre and was transferred back to the ward, that's where they were dying or were getting complications.
Yeah.
And he got the F1 team who had learned all the mistakes about how to do these fast pit stops and actually incorporated those F1 techniques into the operating theatre. And
Brilliant.
Again, it's so relevant to this conference because it's learning from all these other industries about how to make your performance better.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many translatable skills when you look at aviation, medicine, manufacturing. You know, it is about utilizing the people within our teams. And I mean, another book that Matthew's written, not that I'm selling him, my goodness.
We're like his super fans.
No, I've said to him in the past, you owe me a lot of gin and tonics. But he's also written a book called Rebel Ideas, which again, I love because it's all about cognitive diversity. So we can tick gender, we can tick ethnic or cultural diversity, but it's about actually people that think differently. So when we're looking at businesses, especially things like the manufacturing sector, do not just recruit from who you always recruit from. You know, really get out there, get people from different backgrounds. I mean, I see this all the time with my husband. He's severely dyslexic, and I'll go, oh, it's this, and he'll go, oh my God, I didn't see it like that at all. And I think, how could you not? We're both pilots. Surely we should both think about this the same way. And he said, no, I don't ever think of it how you see it. And I thought, it's fascinating. And so it is a really, really interesting one, actually, about utilizing different industries to improve the way that things are done.
Yeah, group think. Very dangerous thing. There's a question here from Helen who says, what piece of advice would you give to someone wanting to catalyze change in the defense manufacturing sector, struggling with organizational treacle, Helen calls it?
Helen, it's a really good point, actually. And often we see businesses whereby senior management want change, the younger people coming through want change, and then we get to this middle management where things stagnate because it's the way it's always been done. And what I would say, actually, I want you to hopefully be empowered by what I've been saying today, to realize that it behoves every single one of us. You know, leadership is not a sign on a door, it's actions. And actually we can do that at every single stage of our career. So it is challenging, I know that. But what I would say is make sure that your voice is heard, because ultimately there are always going to be better ways of doing things. And it is about just chiseling away at things, learning to those assertive skills, so we're not coming across as aggressive. I think that's really, really important. We use lots of different techniques of that in aviation, so that you can take your assertive levels up, so that you're escalating them in a natural way so that people do actually hear you. And again, it's just trying to focus on the outcomes that we want to achieve rather than about individuals. And I think that's how we try to do that, is so that we're not just going in on homing in on just, you know, people. It's about actually creating positive outcomes. So all I can say is it's hard work, but yeah, there is often a lot of organizational treacle, especially in that middle band.
Another question that's come in direct to me: is effective decision making something that's naturally inherent in people, or is it a skill that can be learnt?
I think a little bit of both. I think you have people that are better decision makers, maybe, but without a doubt, and we have seen this again, things like decision-making models. I know it feels quite basic and you think, really, that's a little bit sort of suck eggs, isn't it? But by giving people a model, it almost gives them something to hang their hat on, and it just enables them to stop that procrastination around decision-making, you know, and it almost says, right, I'm at the diagnose stage now. Boom. Okay, guys, what are you seeing? And it just gives them that whole structure to enable better quality decisions to be made. And it's used across the world in aviation on every flight deck. TDODA, time, diagnose, options, make a decision. It's not just turning into collaborative decision making. That's the big fallacy around this. You're bringing in the options from your team, and then you are making a decision still as a leader. So it's not just sort of losing accountability in decisions and having slopey shoulders. It is not that at all. It's basically utilizing all the members of your team to make better quality decisions. And the one thing on that review, which I really like, is I often say, give me a reason not to. So you've suddenly, because often there's a sunk cost fallacy where we put a lot of time and effort into making a decision. Maybe it's gym membership, for example, and then you're not using it, but you think, well, I've already invested so much time and effort, maybe I'll just carry on. But actually it's about reviewing it. Give me a reason not to carry on. And if you can't think of a good reason, it's a good decision.
Yes, a friend of mine always used to say to me whenever I couldn't make it, I am not very decisive sometimes, and he always used to say, don't think about whether you want to do it, think about whether you don't want to do it. You'll regret not doing it in 10 years time, which did focus the mind somewhat. I'd love to come back. I know we're running out of time, but I've honestly, I could talk for hours about these subjects. I think they're so relevant to so many businesses watching. Or business people, but imposter syndrome and being true to yourself, I think, is it's something famously that women suffer from, but it's not always women by any stretch of the imagination. Many men suffer from imposter syndrome, and then your experience is slightly different in that I love it how you were describing how you tried to be someone else, so to be less female or less feminine, and try to sort of ape so those male characteristics. And of course, many people will say that there should be more women in boards or more diversity in boards. But as you were saying, it's more important to have diversity of thought. Whereas a lot of, if we're talking about women for a moment, women in boards or women in very male environments can often just feel they have to have bigger balls than the men in order to compete with the men and be more masculine or more macho, which doesn't really help anybody. How do you get away from that temptation?
So I was listening to, actually, it was a podcast the other day, and I thought it's just really relevant. They sort of said, so often we think of ourselves that we need to be chameleons and we need to fit in and we need to change who we are to fit in with the group. But actually, if we're doing that, then we're never being true to ourselves. So that's not belonging. Belonging is when we identify who we are, we stay true to ourselves, and then we are included and we belong for that reason. And I thought it was a really very, very different thing to fitting in to belonging, because we can change to fit in. And I know I have got many friends, for example, who were gay in the forces and they weren't allowed to be gay. Well, they were never bringing their true selves to work. So actually, you're never going to get someone that can perform to the best of their abilities, because they are living daily a lie as to how they want to behave and showing you a very different side to themselves. And so actually, it's not just about fitting in, it's about finding belonging, which is great, because there's a lot of pieces obviously at the moment around diversity and inclusion. Diversity is what we have and inclusion is what we do with it. And I just think, yes, it's about trying to find that strength of character to say, actually, I am who I am, and I do have a voice, and I do feel that that voice needs to be heard. But you don't have to do it in a way that is just like everybody else in that room. And that's regardless of gender. It's just about being who you are and having that strength of character. And it's hard, and that is hard, by the way. It's way easier for me to say it than to do it. Of course it is. I learned that the hard way. Some of
what you're discussing is that it has to actually be a change at the top of the organization, and if you, the person we're talking about, is not at the top, they can't change it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is challenging, and I know that, and I've done it many times throughout my whole life, even going in to do speeches. And I love this, where I'll go in and I'll be waiting in the queue and I'll be wearing a suit or business thing, and I can hear two women in the queue going, oh, we've got a fast jet pilot coming to talk to us today. Oh, they're always really fit. And I'm standing there thinking, oh, I'm going to so pull you up for that. I get on the stage and say, ladies, stand up and tell me what you said outside. They were like, oh gosh, but just use humor, be true to yourself, and we will get there eventually, won't we, Daisy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to let people go now, because we've only got 10 minutes before the next session, and they'll need a quick dash to the loo or quickly put the kettle on. But Mandy, it's been a really fascinating chat. One last thing, I think you've got a book which I don't think you've plugged.
Yes, I certainly do, actually. Shall I do? In fact, here you go. There we go. But I do have it with me. Yeah, An Officer, Not a Gentleman. It was released in June. It's been the #1 bestseller in aviation books ever since. So it's been quite exciting.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on that. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a really, really fantastic presentation, thoroughly enjoyed, I'm sure, by anybody. That was Mandy. Thank you so much, Mandy Hickson. As I said, we are now going to take a break, just about 10 minutes until the next sessions are due. They're not going to be on this platform, so you'll need to go back to your interactive guide to check out which sessions you want to go to at 12 o'clock. We are going to take a break on this platform on the main stage until 2 o'clock. But join me then at 2 o'clock when we'll be discussing the ventilator challenge and particularly what the positive societal impacts of manufacturing during the pandemic were and how we can really harness that feeling of coming together. So to recap, this webinar closing now, back up again at 2 o'clock. Click on the link in your interactive event guide. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at 2. Bye-bye.